doing a special episode for March 20th, which I'm sure everybody already knows is what?
World Sparrow Day.
That's right. The first of the three legs of the unholy trio is not so unholy other places, which we're going to hear about, and might not even be so unholy in the United States. I'm Billy Brown.
I'm Tony Crosdale.
I'm Robin Irizarry.
Robin is, I'm thinking of him now as like one half of our advisory committee with Hannah, but he's also just like general nature guy around Philly, and in particular, he gets paid to do what?
I get paid to hang out in the TTF watershed, which is the Tacony Frankford Creek. I'm the Philly watershed coordinator. Do a lot of cool stuff in Tacony Creek Park, and we support a lot of the work that the water department's doing, and get to do a lot of urban birding on the side. Good stuff like that.
But as you know, we're always looking for input and feedback from you guys. You can hit us on Twitter at UrbWildlifeCast. You can write us an email at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. You can even give us a call. We've got a phone number, 267-603-3219. Again, 267-603-3219. On this episode, we're going to feature one of our audio postcards from a dude who who called in to talk about
Urban Wildlife Bling.
about sharp-shinned hawks hunting sparrows and flushing them out from underneath cars in South Philly, which is one of the most amazing miniature wildlife spectacles of Philadelphia, and maybe where you are too, so I want to check that out.
Yeah, maybe there's other urban accipiters in parts of the world that do the similar behavior.
If you see an urban accipiter hunting or hanging out in your city, call in, tell us about it. And you can also, if you want to record something on your phone, and then email it to us, and we want to hear about what's going on around your city. So I'll post a link to this. We found, I remember this last year or year before, Dave Hewitt, who we've had as an interviewee, but we're going to have as a guest host soon, had sent us something with an article from basically 100 years ago. Someone, a bird enthusiast on the University of Pennsylvania's campus, which is in West Philly, but West Philly kind of like the eastern part of West Philly. And he was complaining about the house sparrows kind of moving in as he saw it sort of pushing out the native birds and seeing bird diversity crash. Do you know the history of the house sparrows, how they got here?
From what I understand, they were brought in to control insects associated with livestock, and they originally called them horse sparrows.
And they also were introduced into cities to deal with tree pests, basically. I think all three of the unholy trio were very intentionally introduced. The starlings for their Shakespeare value, the pigeons as a food source, and then sort of sporting bird, and then the sparrows in an attempt to control insects. They're from somewhere else, of course, and house sparrows are native to Europe and much of Central Southern Asia, I guess?
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to listen to our first interview.
My name is Mohammed Dilawar, and I'm an ornithologist by profession, and presently I'm heading Nature Forever Society as the president. Now see, the sparrows are continuing to decline across its natural range, and Delhi or India is no different. But if you look at a landscape level in India, we still find some good amount of population of sparrows in rural areas where urbanization has not touched, or in the outskirts of the cities. But in the cities, the population of sparrows is very bad. Now see what is happening. For example, specifically in UK or USA, there is a lot of urban population which feeds birds and other wildlife. But in India, even though it was an Indian tradition of feeding birds and wildlife, now it is something which is fading because of the drastically changing lifestyle. Apart from that, the urban habitat of the sparrow has phenomenally changed in India, because there is a number of new high-rise buildings which are coming up, which are not conducive for the nesting of the sparrows. The next thing is, in India, the landscaping or the plantation which is presently being undertaken, a lot of non-native plants are being used on a very large scale. So this directly affects the insects which depend upon the plant, and the insects are one of the most vital food source for the young chicks of the sparrows. So the next reason is specifically in the urban location. In the past 10-15 years after the globalization has taken place in India, there has been a large scale increase in the mobile phone users or cell phone users in the country. So naturally, the microwave radiation has phenomenally increased. So, in my view, in regard to sparrows, all the wrong things are happening at one single point of time. Now, see, you cannot save the sparrows until unless you involve the citizens of the country into it, because that's one of the most important thing to save sparrows is we have to create habitats which is found in the homes and offices of people. So what we thought about, like we thought about getting people involved, but it is not a very easy task because people are busy, they are from different profession. So we wondered like how can we involve people. So we worked out like even if people meaningfully contribute 5 minutes or half an hour in a week towards sparrow conservation, they can meaningfully play an important role.
One of the more interesting victories that I read about was that you now have the sparrow declared the state bird of Delhi.
Yeah. See, the previous chief minister of Delhi, her name was Sheila Dikshit, and she is an avid sparrow lover. So we were working with her for conservation of sparrows, and she had also inaugurated the first World Sparrow Day. So we, Nature Forever Society presented a memorandum to her, asking her to declare the house sparrow as the state bird of Delhi. By doing this, we wanted to pass two very strong messages. One is, if you see, India has many states, and every state have birds which are very glamorous or they are highly critically endangered or threatened. So the common man or the citizens rarely see this bird. But house sparrow is one bird which is seen by everyone, by kids, by adults, by people from various socio-economic strata. So it represents a common man or a common citizen of India because it's a common house sparrow. It's a bird of the common man. And India is one of the largest democracy in the world, and Delhi is its capital. So if we are able to make the common house sparrow as the state bird of Delhi, it gives a very strong national and international message about how the country and the state of Delhi is serious about conservation of house sparrows. Now see, for a long period of time, the house sparrows were so common and they were such an integral part of the life that people rarely even noticed their presence. So they were found everywhere, right? Nesting in the homes, under on the cups of the fans, inside the bedrooms and halls in a typical Indian home. And they used to pick grains from the mom and pop grocery stores. So they were so common that people rarely even noticed them, because whatever is common you rarely notice it, whatever is rare is more fascinating to humans. uh, However, now when it is starting to decline, and especially the older generation which has grown up with sparrows, are absolutely concerned and they want to do a lot of things about sparrows. But the sad part is the younger generation, the kids of today, who are growing up without sparrows, would not be speaking for conservation of sparrows. Uh, so that's a very important link that we want to re-establish, is the emotional attachment that people have with sparrows. Because until unless you are emotionally attached to something, you will never rise to save it. Now, see, the sparrow represents. it's like an ambassador species for urban ecology. So the same thing like what a tiger is for a forest, the sparrow is for a urban location. So if you are able to save sparrows, invariably we save a lot of other flora and fauna. And in the same way, because we have been continuously working for the past 10 years to make the sparrows more glamorous, people are now talking about sparrows, they are talking about its conservation. But sadly, there are a lot of other common birds which are slowly going to the path of the decline in the same way that the sparrow is going. The native flora of India is decreasing at an alarming rate, and there is very little effort which is being made towards the conservation of the native flora in India and to make propagate them. So these are some of the burning issues that the country is facing, and at this point of time, most of the conservationists they are only concerned about the tigers and the forest, and the uh, common man in India, the citizens of India are so much uh, s- are struggling in earning their daily bread and butter. Like conservation takes a totally backseat in all this. What do you say? Struggle of survival in India. So, in comparison to Europe or America, where conservation of natural resources is given a much more higher priority, in India it takes a backseat because of the socio-economical condition of the country. Oh, the same year, and I would like to thank you for taking up the issues of sparrows, and I'm sure the podcast that you're going to do will create much more awareness in America also.
So, Robin, I saw you nodding along at a few points.
Yeah,
Taking notes too, it looks like.
taking some notes, some good stuff. It's an interesting, perspective to look at something that we kind of see as a nuisance, a problem in some instances, and
Dare I use the term trash bird?
dare say,
That'd be a great band, man.
and just trash bird. That'd be it. Just to see, this
Or
effort
a
to
song
save
for
this,
Moist Owlette to take up.
Yeah.
just the effort to save the bird and make it this kind of, a rallying symbol for the city at least. And what just really resonated was the issues of, in an urban area where you have people have so many other priorities that are kind of really pressing in their lives, and to convince someone to care about, their local wildlife or their creek down their street from them, it takes some work to really make that connection for people sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, Philly, for perspective, Philadelphia has something like 23% poverty rate, which is very high. And then the neighborhoods in Philadelphia that the Tacony Creek flows through in Frankfurt are probably higher than that. Yeah, it's a big challenge.
Yeah.
His talking about like the common man, like in the Sparrow, that kind of thing. It just reminded me of sort of episodes of sort of routine sparrows still getting people's attention. Like I remember this was in Baltimore, which I think it was a great city. I think it was kind of like a half-size Philadelphia. And I was outside some building waiting for some meeting. I forget what I had a minute to kill, so I was outside. There was like some kind of sparrow brawl going on. Like there was like one sparrow and like I forget if it was a male or female, but then there was a female who was just dogging it, like coming after it, and like a bunch of sparrows behind her that were just kind of like not engaging, but sort of watching and like bouncing around like the crowd around a fight, And a woman walks by and she looks at him. We both look at the sparrow. She looks at me. She's like, "Man, she's mad about something." like goes in, and it was just this great. And it was like, yeah, they were sparrows, but it was this great like little connection with wildlife moment. Just outside a random building in Baltimore.
I like it too when you can interact with them. When you could feed them. They'll come take a bread crust right out of your hand, or in my case, a piece of a soft pretzel.
Okay. I was gonna say you're something else, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. People don't even realize that the males and females are the same species because they look so different.
They do, right?
Yeah. Often, too, new birders so often will see female house sparrows and think they're something else, and you have to burst their bubble and be like, "Sorry, it's just a female house sparrow."
Mm-hmm.
I think they're adorable.
I don't know if we already celebrated them as a synanthropic organism.
Synanthropic organism.
But if we have to do a do-over, we'll do it, because this is World Sparrow Day, guys.
Synanthropic organism.
So my name is Jessica Burnett, and I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where I'm working with Drs. Craig Allen and Direct Twidwell on detecting and predicting regime shifts in space and time. And my focus will be on can we and how can we detect massive scale, like broad scale changes in bird communities, especially in urban areas. And I did my master's research at the University of Florida with Drs. Mike Moulton and Catherine Sieving, and I did my thesis on the house sparrow decline. And so ever since then, I've just had an affinity for house sparrows and urban avian ecology. So I love birds in the city. There's a growing interest for sure in understanding what's going on in our urban areas and cities. And to be honest, when I got into wildlife ecology and conservation, I had the idea that I would be working in those remote areas and away from people. However, after working with the house sparrow and other trash birds, I found that there's a lot of questions to be answered in urban areas, and it's where it's most exciting for me. And it's also a lot cheaper to do field work in cities.
I want to ride my bike to my field site and not get on a float plane.
Yeah, it's kind of convenient, and you don't have long days.
So you and Billy were talking a bit. I think I missed out. We refer to house sparrows, starlings, and pigeons as the unholy trio, and it seems like you are a bit of a defender of the house sparrows. So could you plead your case for the house sparrows?
Yeah, so the unholy trio, I mean, I've heard you guys refer to them as the unholy trio, and I think what the president of the ADA also, and probably other avid bird watchers. But, the house sparrow is declining across the globe across most of its native and non-native range. And especially in the UK where I think they're red listed, not IUCN red listed, but whatever the UK's red list is. They've been declining for the last 50 to 70 years in the UK, and researchers just don't know why. And it's kind of disturbing because we've got this species, the house sparrow, European starling, those undesirable non-native species that are just no longer thriving alongside us in urban areas. And it's just a little disturbing to me because what's going to happen to our native wildlife? And it may be positive that, if the house sparrows are extirpated or pushed out of our urban areas, maybe that'll make room for the native species and the more desirable species. But what happens if no bird species are able to thrive in our cities anymore? That's why it's really interesting, and I don't consider them unholy. And there's also a push by some, not necessarily myself, but in the invasive species ecology realm, that maybe these species shouldn't be considered harmful, invasive in these novel ecosystems that are cities. Maybe they're not considered non-native anymore. I don't know, but that's why I like the house sparrow, and I don't consider them unholy whatsoever. But of course, we do have people on the other side of the camp, especially in North America, the bluebird enthusiasts.
Well, that's interesting because how much of a problem are they really? Because I work in the Wissahickon Park, so I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you right there. I'm on my lunch break, so I'm in the woods, and at our feeders, we get no house sparrows whatsoever.
Yeah.
If you were to have a feeder up at only a couple hundred yards, 'cause we're on the border of the park, you go a few hundred yards from here, then you'd probably have almost nothing but house sparrows. So they really seem to be confined to really built up areas. So how much of a problem do they really pose to native species in terms of competition? Because they really disappear once you get into natural conditions, in my experience.
Yeah, so my opinion is that and from my experience, mostly in the southeast United States, is that they really aren't posing negative consequences to native species, except when they, sometimes do encounter, for example, other cavity nesters like the eastern bluebirds. What's been documented, especially when the house sparrow was doing really, really well in North America, is that if a house sparrow found a bluebird's nest that was occupied, it might peck out the brains of the eastern bluebird or other native cavity nesters. But what's happening to the house sparrows, according to my research, is that they're becoming increasingly restricted to those built-up areas you were talking about. So they're no longer really thriving in exurban or peri-urban areas. or really areas where there's any forest, any canopy forest. So I'm not sure that other than the birds pooping on people's heads or making a mess in their stoop and cleanliness issues, there's really no harmful effects that I think they're still posing to native wildlife, including humans.
With us, both this park and Pennypack Park, the house sparrows aren't the ones taking bluebird boxes. It's native species, house wrens and chickadees and whatnot. It's not a house sparrow, so. And you can't get any more urban than Philly. We still get cardinals and goldfinches and blue jays. Obviously, native species are still able.
I'm really interested in is in these older cities like Philly, and I'm not sure how canopied or forested some parts of Philly are, but what's happening as our cities age, and especially in like mid-sized cities where urban greening or the growth of the physical and vertical growth of our forests may be facilitating the invasion, so to say, of our urban adaptive species like the cardinals.
Do you look at the diet of the urban house sparrows much?
No, I did no diet work.
I'm just wondering, are they is bread crust and like pizza crust and Fritos and French fries versus seeds and insects?
Human refuge is a pretty substantial part of their diet in the highly urbanized setting. But of course, if the house sparrow does have access to waste grains or seed heads, they will exploit those at any cost. And one of the leading hypotheses, and this comes out of a lot of work that's been done in the UK, is that during the breeding season, of course, the nestling sparrows, who actually are multiple brooders throughout the year, so that they'll sit on multiple nests throughout the year, insect availability in urban areas, which sounds like that's something that you worked on for your master's, may be a limiting factor to the breeding success and colony growth or population growth of the house sparrow. So diet is definitely an interesting facet of their decline, and all urban sparrows and birds. So unfortunately, I'm not primarily focusing on the house sparrow anymore since starting my doctoral program. But what I did at the University of Florida for my master's work was first we looked at the Christmas bird count, which is a citizen science-based program hosted by the Audubon Society. And these are basically wintering bird counts. And again, I'm sure you're familiar with this.
I do many of them.
These are winter bird counts conducted annually. And so what I did first was we looked at what's going on these Christmas bird counts over time, over large periods of time with the house sparrow and other synanthropic species or urban exploiters. And what we found was, unsurprisingly, the house sparrows are declining in Florida and the southeast. And we next did a site-level study in the city of Gainesville, Florida, which is where the University of Florida is. And we basically wanted to just find out, hey, where are these house sparrows in our study area in Gainesville? And what we found, we sampled in both residential areas and highly urbanized settings. So an example of a residential area would be a single-family housing neighborhood. And in Florida, a lot of these single-family housing neighborhoods have pretty nice old-growth canopies. And the urban settings in Florida sometimes have minimal canopy growth, and sometimes they're just no trees at all. And what we found was we conducted hundreds of point counts over a single season in the summer of, I believe, 2013. And we found literally zero house sparrows in the residential areas of Gainesville, Florida. And this may be a phenomenon occurring in southeastern states adjacent to and near Florida, but that's not something that we replicated in other sites. So we thought that was really, really interesting. Hey, even though house sparrows could probably exploit and outcompete other native birds and non-native birds at the bird feeders, they just aren't there. And we also found in the urban areas, those highly developed business districts or outside of a grocery store, we found that their numbers, their colonies are pretty limited and restricted to highly, highly developed areas. And we found a negative relationship between urban greening, or the amount of green vegetation, trees, and residential areas, and the probability of a house sparrow being present at a site. It would be really interesting if that occupancy stuff, looking at where house sparrows are in relation to the amount of urban greening or canopy cover, could be replicated at broader scales or even at another site to do some comparative work.
Wow, we should talk because I want to since I work for Parks and Rec, and I'm part of the Delaware Valley Ornithological Club, and you mentioned you had mentioned Christmas bird counts, and I feel that, they're great, but they don't tell us anything about birds the rest of the year, and I was thinking of doing one with my friend, doing a breeding bird count for Philadelphia specifically. But what we wanted to do was not just, it's really easy to get people to cover all the green area spaces, and we could probably get that, even though we have 10,000 acres of them in Philly, we could still probably get them covered. How do we get, where almost 2 million people live, how do we get the residential areas covered? So we're thinking of doing, dividing up the city by housing types and just sampling. So that will give us a lot of information on house sparrows. See what they look like in areas where there's row houses with no lawns to where there's row houses with little lawns to where there's, twins, where there's single family houses to where there's neighborhoods that have tree cover versus no tree cover. We're going to look at all that. So
yeah, another question of interest for me is, how do we efficiently and correctly monitor these synanthropic or urban exploiter species? When I mentioned earlier that I used the Christmas bird count to monitor population or to estimate population trends or overall trends of the house sparrow, I used the Christmas bird count, which is not exactly reliable for population or abundances in urban birds because, as you mentioned before, it's really easy to get bird watchers to go out to those nice forested natural landscapes, but who the heck wants to go sample behind a dumpster like I did?
yeah, exactly. Well, this guy, but other people, it's harder. Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe the people listening to the podcast, but yeah, very few people want to do that. When I present this work saying, look, house sparrows are declining, people don't believe me, and then I say, look, wow, they're disappearing from our backyards, they still don't believe me. And when I present this work at national and regional conferences, the people who aren't from the southeastern U.S. and Florida in particular just really, they didn't believe me at all that any of the things that I was saying about the house sparrow was true. And then when I moved out to the Midwest, to Nebraska, I live in a fairly suburban area in a single-family home, and my feeders are dominated by house sparrows. So whether or not these the missingness of the house sparrow in residential areas is going to spread out to areas like the Midwest is unknown.
Well, hopefully this interview will just generate this tsunami of people interested in house sparrows in urban areas, and we'll flood you with information. We'll figure it out. We'll make one of our catchy songs about it.
As long as there's double bass pedal, we're good.
Double bass pedal? We can make it happen.
Okay, great.
Robin was just at the end saying something cool, because at the end of that interview we're talking about, Tony and Jessica were talking about the need to take the passion of birders and get them out of the hot spots down the shore or Cape May or the reservoir and
the sewage treatment plant.
The sewage treatment plant, which in Philadelphia is a big deal, home of the winter rough-winged swallows. And get them into just the neighborhoods to count things like sparrows. And Robin was saying,
I was saying how I've gotten into the practice of now, if I'm, in the grocery store parking lot, taking some time to, identify what's hanging around the kind of, you got ringbill gulls and starlings and all sorts of stuff. But I've seen kestrels over a ShopRite, just a month ago. And it's the kind of thing, especially in a city like Philly that's going through this big change right now as all this green stormwater infrastructure goes in and all these rain gardens with native plants are going in. I'm really interested in seeing how the introduction of these little islands and pockets of native plants starts, whether over time that'll start.
When you say a garden, these are not big gardens. So for context, how big is the stormwater bump out garden?
I mean, most of these little things, you're talking maybe 3 feet by 10 feet, and you might have a couple of these, down a block. There's some bigger ones going in, but just this idea that you're creating this little patchwork, and you can create little habitat and kind of expand habitat into the residential and our very urban fabric.
But then but the question of sparrows isn't just a question of those little nuggets of habitat, but also just how many sparrows are living in the habitat of my block.
Right, right. It's existing.
Yeah, we
or the
talked
parking
about
lot
that,
at the supermarket.
The idea of doing sampling.
Yeah.
And sample, figure out different housing types, different tree cover, and make those into zones, and then sample a few, and then extrapolate from there, so you don't have to go every block. There's no way you could do that in Philly.
There's a lot of blocks, but you could a good sampling of blocks and just see what's on your what's outside the.
And you can assume that it's probably uniform, more or less.
Yeah.
The typical row home supports X number of sparrows. Yeah.
Yeah.
By now, you might have already heard some Sparrow calls that I recorded on the way to work, on our block, and then at Washington Square, which is in Center City, and just it wasn't hard for me to find Sparrow. I was I wonder if I'll hear any Sparrows call. Okay, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. They're practically ubiquitous throughout built-up Philadelphia. But Robin, you're just talking about even Tacony.
Tacony is a much narrower park, this ribbon of green, compared to some of the bigger watershed parks in the city, like the Wissahickon and Pennypack. Tacony's just much narrower than our bigger watershed parks. But even there, you really don't see the house sparrows infiltrate into the deeper parts of the park, really. They're content to hang out on the same block, with the porches out front. They'll hang out on the pavement, and they don't. As soon as you make that transition in, you see there's the house sparrows on the edge. Once you get in, you start to see the song sparrows, white throats and all that kind of stuff. Just shifts.
Feeder up at the Cedars House, which is a cafe, literally 50 yards inside the Wissahickon Park, and across the street for the entrances, a residential street with house sparrows on it, and they don't come to the feeder. That's 50 yards from the street.
Who comes to the feeder?
Chickadees, nuthatches, cardinals, the whole usual suite of woodpeckers. By the way, I definitely put a bird feeder up at the cafe that I frequent. I don't know if you call it that. It's a cafe that I go eat lunch at, and I put a bird feeder up at it so I can watch birds while I eat lunch.
Wait, up in Wissahickon?
Yeah, it's a cafe. It's not the Siege House. It's not my work. It's not their feeder. So I was like, here, why don't you put a feeder here?
I'll put a feeder at my
what you
local
need?
Burger King.
Yeah. Actually, yes. So, in any case, when this is our little urban wildlife contribution to World Sparrow Day, for our friends or people in Europe through India who are genuinely concerned about the decline of one of their native birds, moral support, good vibes we'll send.
Absolutely. And
then even in our continent where we don't have such high regard for the house sparrow, maybe we should. And they make a neat model organism for the novel ecosystem.
Perhaps are they the canary in the mine of the novel ecosystem?
Maybe.
And if you're doing bird research out there in urban areas and you're feeling down, just know that there's some folks in Philadelphia that think you're cool.
That's true. We want to hear from you. If you're doing urban bird research and you're feeling down, you can record a little something on your phone and send it to us.
Or urban wildlife research in general.
Urban wildlife research in general. You can give us a call and leave a message at 267-603-3219. You can email us at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. Tweet about birds at us at urbwildlifecast, and find us on Facebook. Leave a comment over there. And for everybody out there, make sure you rate us on your favorite podcasting software, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher. Tell us what you think so other people can find it, and tell your friends what you think. Spread the word.
Absolutely. If you need encouragement to keep going, you feel you're lonely, you're in a place in the world you don't think there's anybody else who loves wildlife like you do, and you feel alienated, you can always call us. Call us at that number anytime. The Wildlife Bling.
Hi, my name's John Jensen. I live down in South Philadelphia. I love Urban Wildlife Podcast, and I'm a volunteer with the Friends of the Wissahickon and the PHS Tree Tenders. I really love it when I'm driving home and the sharp-shinned hawks are flying down the narrow South Philadelphia streets, flushing the sparrows out from underneath the cars. It's better than a space fight scene in Star Wars, watching them fly underneath cars, flush birds out, go back and forth across the street, all while traffic is driving along, just like nothing else is going on.
There's a retaining wall near my house, and it has all these little holes. And the house sparrows have started to, they've been nesting in there. And I started going out, and I thought, this is a good little citizen science project. I will check all of these little things and see which ones have nests in them, because they're coming in and out. Some of them have like baseballs because it's by the Little League, and like kids are stuffing bottles in them. But I was trying to see the elevation, like where do they prefer to nest. And then life is just crazy, so I never got back to it. But I figured once my interns, my children, once they get old enough, I'll put them on it, and I'll have them fulfill my citizen science projects.
This might be the first truly compelling reason to have children that I've heard.
Yeah.
So if you want to procreate with me and raise an army of
Army of
wildlife
interns.
enthusiasts, you can also call that phone number.